This episode of Tech Indie Learnin is brought to you by the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc.
Heritage is the foundation built by our ancestors on which we stand to build a brighter future for those yet to come. Today, we explore the Chattel House. Come, lewwe Tech Indie Learnin.
Hello, I'm Carl Watson, retired senior lecturer in history and archaeology at the University of the West Indies.
I'm Zoena Perry-Willett. I'm an avid Barbadian lover of all things Bajan and an eternal student who's here to take in some learning. So come with me as I chat with Carl, who I've been invited to call him Carl, and we're going to be talking about chattel houses today. So, Carl, what makes a chattel house a chattel house?
Well, again, fascinating question. And essentially, the designation chattel house is linked to the idea of chattel, a possession, but also and this is where now I have a bit of difference from the accepted view of the origins of the chattel house and development of the chattel house. The accepted view is that after emancipation, when the newly freed people then were sent to they were moved from the heart of the plantation, where they originally lived, and sent to the perimeter of the plantation, the rabland of the plantation, and they occupied rented land. So they didn't have tenure of possession of land. So that meant that as occupiers of rented land, they were subject to the whims of the landlord. And if they fell out with the landlord, they could be instructed to take back everything and move. So the idea of the chattel house is that it is a post-emancipation development where chattel houses were constructed that in a way that it could be taken apart and moved from point A to point B. Now, okay, I'm not disputing that this happened because there is truth in that. But however, I have seen drawings and evidence that prior to 1834, in the early 19th century, 1810s, 1820s, before emancipation, there were small poplar wooden houses being built and constructed, which are clearly prototypes of the chattel house. But what I find very interesting about the chattel house is that, and this is an argument that I have developed, I find the chattel house in terms of its proportion, its decoration, its architectural features to be a very important and integral part of Barbadian identity. And of course, when we talk about identity, we have to acknowledge the role that heritage, tangible and intangible, plays in the creation and maintenance and concretization of our identity. So the Barbadian chattel house, which in terms of architectural forms throughout the Caribbean is, I think, the word unique is overused, but it is largely unique and special to Barbados. So let us look at the origins of the architectural form that we know today as the chattel house.
What are, would you say, just to pinpoint one or two, some of the unique architectural features?
Again, thank you for that. Give me that opening. There is a link between the facade of the chattel house and early Greco-Roman architecture. And an Italian architect by the name of Palladio in the late 16th, early 17th century witnessed Greco-Roman temple styles, etc., and thought how wonderful to reproduce them in what for him were modern times. And so out of that came Palladian architecture, which then morphed into Georgian architecture. And the Barbadian Chattel House, the facade, the form, is a direct descendant of Palladio and Georgian styles. If you look at a Chattel House, you will see that the door is always placed dead center.
Yes.
And on either side are windows. And again, that's one of the major tenets of Georgian architecture: balance and harmony. And this is what the Chattel House, the Barbadian Chattel House, has espoused: balance and harmony. And so the entrance, the ultimate expression of the Barbadian Chattel House, has a Neo-Grecian architectural feature there. You have the portico, which gives you shelter and provides like a specific architectural entrance to the main doorway of the house. And this is composed of a triangular pediment. And if you look at the association, that triangular pediment is borrowed directly from the triangular pediment of Greek temples of 2,000 years ago. And that pediment is supported by carved wooden pillars, again, which are in miniature replicas of the Greek, Corinthian, or Ionic temple pillars. So beyond that, of course, then, the Chattel House is again an interesting example of how people can start small and as families grow, add on. So what we Bajans would call the front house, which became then the showpiece. And very often, as children, you couldn't romp and run around and play in the front house. The front house is where if
Still can.
you had a glass cabinet, and the extra special things of your mother or grandmother were put in this glass cabinet. You could look, but you couldn't, dare not, take these things out and play with them or touch them. And if you broke a treasured possession of your grandmother or your mother,
I already feel the lashes when the cuckoo stick.
oh yes, lashes would share, let me tell you. But then, of course, because the Chattel House then was a gable roof form, you could then add on another structure, and as money permitted, or as the family grew, you could add on a third section. So the Chattel House then was a section house that could grow over time.
I've heard it say that the Bajan term for it would be when you catch your hand. So you get the money you can add on to the back.
When you catch your hand, when you got that extra income, if you got a little bonus at Christmas time,
Oh yeah.
or if you had stock, because when I was a child, every household had stock. You know, you would have a few sheep, everybody kept fowls, a turkey or two, ducks, because you had to turn hand and make fashion. You had to do whatever was necessary to improve your standard of living, your quality of life. And don't talk about when Christmas came around.
Oh.
Everybody had to go down to the beach. It's illegal today, but everybody went on the beach and got beach sand, and you spread around the house, or you got marl and put in front of the house. New blinds for the windows, or if the money didn't allow you to go in Swan Street and buy the material to make blinds, you would take down everything and wash. And because Christmas was extra special. And you know, when I was a child, there were no Christmas trees to go and buy, either fake or real. If you wanted a Christmas tree, you cut a branch of the cherry tree, or you cut a branch of a mild tree, a casuarina tree, and you put it in the house. I'll tell you this, we didn't have enough money to go out and buy any Christmas decorations, which the better off people could do. but we had to decorate our Christmas tree, which was a mild tree. And my mother, bless her soul, she smoked. And she smoked a brand that was very popular back then, years gone by, trumpeter cigarettes. And the cigarettes came wrapped in a silver foil. So you would keep the silver foil over the years because that silver foil would be turned into a silver ball,
Yeah.
and you could tie it with like a red string or a green string and tie it to the mild tree, which was your Christmas tree. You didn't have fake snow, but you got a little cotton wool and you put around the base of the tree, and that was snow. And that's how Christmas was
Creating good
celebrated. But
memories.
everybody looked forward to ham. Perhaps your favorite turkey was slaughtered and you had it for Christmas lunch, or the brown fowl that you liked. Poor thing, lost its head, was plucked and cooked. But you made, because every Chattel house had a backyard. I mean, I'll tell you this. I wasn't born in the Chattel house that I grew up in Culloden Road. But when I was 2 years old, my mother and father moved with their younger children from Barbados Hill to where we were going to live in my great-grandmother's house on Culloden Road. And my memories go back a long way. And I'm blessed with like a photographic memory. And I can close my eyes now. And I'm transported back in time to 1948 when I'm a child being brought by my father in his arms into my great-grandmother's house. I can look up. The house had no electricity, no running water, and I can, in my mind's eye, look up. It didn't have a ceiling. It had the inside gable roof that was whitewashed, and I can look up and see in the corner where my great-grandmother had one of these home sweet home lamps that would burn, and when she turned the flame too high, the soot went up, the ash, and where the whitewash was, you'd see like a black deposit of ash and so on there up in the roof. And it went through a little passageway into like a small dining room area and the side bedroom, and then a coral stone, and you walk down or jump down that coral stone and went down into bare earth, because the kitchen was like a lean-to roof, and the bare earth was there where you would have a coal pot and you would burn coal and you would cook on that. And then there was a paling surrounding the back, and in the back, I mean, there was no, as I said, there was no water attached to the house, so obviously there were no indoor toilet facilities. What we had in the back was a pit toilet.
Heard of those.
And this was our life, and this was a life that the vast majority of Barbadians shared.
Now we're talking Chattel houses, and I have with me Jason. He's an architectural technologist and designer. And Jason, my first question is, what makes a Chattel house different from a wood house?
Okay. All right, well, strictly speaking, Chattel houses are characterized by symmetry. So that would look like a central door on the facade and flanked by two windows equally spaced from that door. Further on, the traditional Chattel houses would have been started as single modules, which typically would be twice as wide to the road than they are deep.
Okay. And is that symmetry one of the reasons why they were so good at withstanding natural disasters?
Well, now that's a good question. So another distinctive feature of the Chattel house would be the gable roof, which would typically be at a 45-degree angle slope. And yes, that attributes to one of the factors that made Chattel houses so resilient in times of tropical storms and hurricanes. That pitch roof, right, the angle. Also, Chattel houses typically would have had a shart overhang, right, which is the bit that hangs over the wall. Also, the gable end windows, which you would find to the left and right of the chattel house at the high level, just to the apex, or just below the apex of the roof. Those also allowed for ventilation and air to travel through the roof space of the chattel house, which also attributes to the resilience in high wind.
We are moving away from the chattel house in Barbados. It's no longer the go-to house, so to speak. I've been seeing a lot more houses that are kind of box and squarish in their structure. How are we creating climate resilient homes now in Barbados?
Right. Well, there's a movement, as we get into more consciousness with sustainability and climate change and so on. There's definitely a movement to pay more attention to the arrangement, the orientation of houses, the use of materials, how the roof is treated. I mentioned that chattel houses traditionally would have short overhangs. So we here in this region, we tend to avoid as much as possible having too deep overhangs or too long overhangs. We are also paying attention to the roof slope. So typically you would want to avoid having a very shallow roof, anything below 15 degrees. The reason for that is that the suction created on winds passing over that roof tends to be greater when you have lower overhangs or more shallow overhangs. So those things like that, designers and architects are paying attention to. And we're also taking inspiration from chattel houses. So, we may install or have high-level windows, such as the gable windows, designed into the house if it fits to the character. So those are some of the approaches taken.
I know you recently returned from a conference about heritage conservation for architecture. How are we doing that to preserve our iconic chattel house?
Right. Well, we have a number of designers and organizations that are focused on retaining the architectural heritage. So I spent 3 weeks in a training program which was geared and focused on architectural conservation and training, I guess, the capacity to recognize the care and attention that some projects may need. I think we are doing a relatively good job. There are a number of chattel houses on the island which are designated as National Trust buildings, and that is one of the efforts, as I understand it, to maintain that heritage. We, as designers and architects as well too, such as myself, I tend to lean towards, wherever possible, incorporating traditional vernacular into my architecture, as a way to pay homage, for instance, to the chattel house, and to continue the tradition of using certain features and elements that were both functional and unique to Barbados.
How could I, if I were a chattel house owner, not on a National Trust program, what little things can I do to preserve my home? Right.
Okay, well, there are simple things such as the maintenance of the structure, or let's start with the facade. Over a period of time, the paint tends to peel. Peeling paint then exposes the wood and makes it more susceptible to rot and wear. So, just making sure that every few years you update the paint, you refinish the house basically to protect the wood. Other things such as the roofing as well too. The materials of the roof would degrade over a period of time, and there are measures you can take to extend the resilience of the roofing material.
You just said something interesting, so I really want to know. A gable roof may be made from paling. If I'm no longer using paling, and I say put on, I don't know, I clay tiles.
Right.
Create my gable roof from clay tiles. Will it still be a chattel house, or is this now a whole different house?
That's a very good question. That was something that came up in training program I did in Antigua under the Commonwealth Heritage Forum. And the finish of the roof tends to add to the character and the distinctive nature of a structure. So there's an argument as to whether if you use a material other than what would have been traditionally used, that goes far left of what was traditionally used, are you being true to the historical context of the building? Yeah, well, but I would say we are in a contemporary modern era, and materials have improved. So I tend to lean towards it being okay to use updated and more contemporary materials, right? Because after all, we're not trying to replicate exactly the chattel house in our modern houses. You know, it's almost impossible because the chattel house came as a result of certain things like the modular length of timber planks, because of lack of materials or lack of resources. But we live in a different age, so I would say it's fine to use, you know, contemporary and modern materials.
And still call it a chattel house?
I would more lean towards a chattel house inspired structure rather than a chattel
What
house.
do you think housing would look like in Barbados in 30 years? Because we are already making a shift from the traditional chattel house look. Where 30 years do you see housing?
Right. I can tell you what I would like to see and what the trends I'm seeing. I'll start with the trend I'm seeing. There's a movement towards modern architecture, modern/contemporary architecture, which is almost like a simplified version of what we have now. You know, so you're seeing overuse of overhangs, cantilevers, elements that kind of encase and articulate the facade of a building, which is fine. And so we're moving towards that direction more and more. But what I would like to see happening over the course of the next 30 years is, in addition to the movement towards modern and contemporary, but bringing back traditional elements as well, like iconic elements like possibly the gable roof, continuing to use the hip roof and integrating them with the flat roofs and clean, simple lines of modern and contemporary architecture. I'm merging the two, because again, we are in a different era, and naturally we will use the materials and the structures and so on that are updated and work more efficiently. But that doesn't mean we can't still learn from our architectural legacy and integrate the two, so we have a truly unique architectural language to Barbados and not look like any otherwhere else.
I know we have trailers and RVs and houses like that, but as a modular home that can be taken down and erected, are we doing anything similar to that as looking for affordable housing options? Because that's really what a chattel house was. It was an affordable housing option for the enslaved persons.
Yeah. Well, yes, I think there are architects and designers who are thinking along that lines of modularity and prefab housing. That is a trend or a practice that we are seeing internationally in the United States and Europe. You know, the idea of modular houses and micro houses and so on. Being true to the actual idea of modularity, where the house can be collapsed and moved from site to site, not necessarily. That's not something personally I've seen very much. But yes, to the idea of the house being modular in that you're using the materials that you have access to, using them in a modular way, right? With the ideal that you will be adding to this house incrementally as you expand your family or your means increase. So I myself have been involved in projects which try to use that concept of incrementally adding or designing for incremental additions to the house. There are other architects and designers who are doing that. So yeah.
I could see myself in a tiny home with Chattel-inspired gable roof, two nice little windows to look out of. So I'm looking forward to maybe the future of us having small little chattel villages that we live in that are taken on. I say, don't let you west side this time, I'll go to the east.
Absolutely. Yeah.
When I was a child, there was this huge social and economic divide in Barbados between those who lived in wooden structures and those who lived in wall structures. And those who lived in wall structure tended to look down on those who lived in wooden structures. Regardless of one's complexion and so on, the great divide, as I said in Barbados in my youth, was those who lived in wall and those who lived in wood. And as our society, the middle class has grown exponentially, as people's income has increased, because our per capita income has increased markedly. We're now, in terms of the Caribbean, the third highest per capita income in the entire region. And so with disposable income, people have abandoned small wooden houses and have moved into the heights and the terraces. People have moved out of the village. The whole ethos, the whole community of the village, that has largely disappeared. It's not completely gone, but it's largely disappeared or is disappearing. And so now the Chattel House of today, you go down into the Sunset Crest area. Yeah. What do you see? The Chattel House village. The Chattel House now has become that pretty little romanticized structure. Mm-hmm. And it's something created then not for the Barbadian vision, because the Barbadian is escaping the Chattel House. It's been created for the tourist gaze. Here are these cute little things. You know, when I was a child, I would hear visitors to the island saying, "My gosh, look at all those doll houses." Because that's what we were told, that we lived in doll houses, you know. They couldn't imagine that a family of 9 people would live in this tiny little structure. But we did. And thousands of other Barbadians did as well. And it didn't warp us. It didn't stunt our development. We developed as ordinary human beings. It didn't crush our aspirations, our hopes of a better future. And those of us who could escape the anchoring of the Chattel House, we did. I mean, in life, you aspire to improve your lifestyle and improve things. And so in today's Barbados, yes, a great many of us have escaped that anchor of the past, but we should never forget where we come from.
Our heritage has paved the road for us to walk further and easier. So join us next time as we tech in the learning.